Hello YouTube, Lazarus Hawthorne here. Figured I'd give you another video pretty quickly so you guys can get an idea of what I can actually do. So today's video is going to be me actually making a spearhead for a character in the New York Renaissance Fair in Tuxedo, New York called the Leper King Rancid Harry. So let me give you a quick tour of my, my setup while I wait for the metal to heat up. So here we got the work table, handmade by me and my not as great days. And there you see the metal heating up. Over there is my 150-pound ammo for those of you who can't guess weights and measures by sight alone. As you can see here, we got the metal heating up, getting ready to be forged. Some of the coal burning off quite nicely. And yeah, so once the metal gets to a nice cherry red glow, we'll begin. Behind it there is the chalkboard that sadly is being used as a heat shield for my car, but it is what it is. And let's get this going. Alright, so to begin with, that's some good forging steel right there. Now let's go start with our tip. As you can see, the color has now dropped back down. I've managed to maintain the rough same thickness as it started out with. The idea is that while the metal is hot, you want to hit it as much as possible, as quickly as possible. The more hits you get in, the more shape you get, as you saw. The trick is not to get your metal to where it's almost white hot. When you see sparks coming from your metal, you've overheated your metal. You will actually be beginning to burn the carbon from it. Once you do that, the steel is pretty much useless as a tool steel or a weapon steel. What I'm going to continue to do is I'm going to continue to hammer on the sides, bringing the front part to a point, but I got to make sure that I hit the flat side as well to maintain the proper thickness. So let's add a little bit more coal to the fire. Now the one thing I'm going to warn you fresh blacksmiths about is that coal does break apart, it does pop. That is what that popping sound is you're hearing in the background. That sometimes can fly off and hit you, and it does burn, trust me. It gets me almost once every time I forge. Some of my tools while I let the metal heat up. Here you see me using a welding glove. Obviously it's seen some better days. But it allows me to handle the metal without much issue. Normally, and I forgot to put it on before I started filming, normally I wear a fingerless glove just to protect my palm and my thumb from the wear and tear of the hammer. Just wiping off some carbon buildup that fell off the metal, off my forge. Handy dandy homemade poker. Here again we see the metal is nice and hot, but because I had to move some of the coal around before I actually started hitting it, I'm going to put it back on for a little bit longer. So as some of you might have noticed from my picture of my setup, is that I use coal. Now gas is just fine, propane works great. And the nice thing about propane is you have direct control over the heat. You don't have to worry about, say, putting too much coal in or accidentally burning your metal as much. Whereas with coal, I have no control over the temperature. It does what it does. The only thing I have control over is the airflow. So basically, it's my preferred version. I prefer standing next to a fire, not a bomb. All right, guys. So I'm going to quickly work on some hammer etiquette or hammer function while we wait for the metal to heat up. So as you can see here, I'm using a, let's say, about maybe pound heavy ball peen hammer for most of my my more softer, delicate work. Now, part of the people think that it's pure, just brute strength. It's not. Forging is actually a lot of finesse. You actually want to hit the metal lightly, because otherwise you're going to damage and dent the metal. Now, here's some ways to hit the metal properly so you don't deform it and make it look funny. So first off, you don't want to heel it. This is called heeling the metal, where you hit with the actual front part of the edge of the hammer. This actually leaves a nice dent in the metal that is very hard to work out. There is also towing the metal, when you actually hit too far and you end up doing the same thing but with the other half of the hammer. What you want is nice and flat. Good, flat contact. This spreads the metal evenly and allows for the best shape and form. This also allows you to maintain your hammers for a much longer period of time. If you don't follow this properly, you can actually damage your hammers to where you have to buy new ones every couple of months or so. And also, if you're not careful, you can shatter the handle on it because you're not hitting the hammer properly. So, let's get back to what we're doing. Alright, so as you can see, we've got a nice, decent point going on there. Now, one of the things that I realized I didn't really cover too well was how I'm hitting the metal. Now see, when I'm hitting the metal, what I'm actually doing is hitting on the side, and then I have to lay it flat to make sure I keep the thickness right. Now in order to draw it out to a point, I just keep hitting on the tip more and more as it draws it further and further and further, eventually getting the tip that I want. In order to truly achieve a fine point with a hammer, I eventually had to bring the metal like that. By doing that, that allowed me to maneuver the metal to generate that nice, even triangle, as you can see on both sides. If you look, I maintain relatively the right thickness for the rest of the blade. Now, you might ask, what's next? What are we going to do on the rest of this piece, Lazarus? So now I have to do what's called spreading it. I have to actually spread the metal to make it wider. Now the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to take my hammer and I'm actually going to hit on the edges and pull down. By doing this over and over and over, I actually end up pulling the metal away from the center, thinning it out just like I did the tip, but on a much wider scale. So now I'm going to begin that process, so this way I have a wider spearhead that is also a bit more pleasing to the eye. Alright guys, so we're back. And as you can see, I've definitely widened out the blade. I've also tapered it down a little bit at the top so it kind of flows nicely. If you look real close, you can actually see the tabletop and the edges of the spear are already taking shape. These will become more prominent after the grinding process. So now what I'm going to be doing next is actually taking my big hammer. I'm going to be pulling this part in, bringing this in at about half to 2/3 of its current thickness. The plan for that is that it fits nicely in the spear shaft, and I can tie it off nicely. After that, I have to split the bottom end to create sort of a dovetailed like separation. So basically I take the metal, which is like this, and just spread it like that until I get two 90-degree bends. At which point I then have something for that if the spear were to get stuck in something when you go to pull it out, is it doesn't just slide right out of the shaft. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, As you can see, I have narrowed down the part that will be in the shaft, and the more observant viewers might notice that I've already cut a groove into the end of the spear. Now, this groove will eventually become the flanges, as I spoke about, that'll hold the spear into the shaft once I've tethered it all together. So here's the spear as it stands. So we got a nice point on the end of it here, good for thrusting. Nice narrow tip which flares out to spread the armor apart. Make the rings that if somebody's wearing might pop open. Got a good strong end here, nice and thick to withstand the force of the thrust. And next we're going to work on these flanges here. So I'm going to try and get somebody to hold the camera so I can actually show you how to do this part. Alright guys, so as you can see here we got it nice and hot. So the way we're going to do this is instead of hitting here, which is the intuitive way, we actually hit here. We got to hit this part down. So once we got it like that, now we actually can start hitting this part to that 90-degree angle. Making sure to stop every now and then to make sure we keep this nice and flat. And silver button. Alright, so we've heated it up again. We just keep tapping it down. Now obviously, as I'm sure a lot of you have figured out at this point, the hotter the metal is, the easier it is for you to shape it. Alright, so now we need to heat it one more time, but we're going to start hammering this back flat so that we can do the same process. Silver button. Alright, so now we should be able to finish it off right here. All I'm doing right now is trying to maintain some level of symmetry. As you can see, my cutting was a little bit off, but when I go back through with the grinder, I'm going to balance that out a little bit. But otherwise, there you go. There's your spearhead. All nice and finished. All I got to do now is some cleanup grinding and some polishing. Off.